Welcome back, guys. Jake Ellenbogen here, previewing the Rams and Buccaneers. Very important game coming up week 3. It is going to be nationwide. We're going to be watching 4:25 Eastern time, and it's going to be an incredible game. But let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. Before we do, be sure to subscribe, comment, and like. We'll get right into the lineup. So right off the bat, with the Buccaneers, Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones in the backfield. I think those guys are really going to split the carries from, the rest of the way. I don't see the Buccaneers trying to run the ball too much because, the last time they couldn't really run the ball against the Rams. They haven't really tried running the ball much this year. So they either want to get that going or they're either, not going to get that going, what have you. Those are the two guys that are going to be splitting the carries. Then you have Chris Godwin, who, of course, caught a touchdown the last time he faced the Rams last year. He's having a good year. Mike Evans is coming off his 2-touchdown performance after being pretty much shut out in the first game. Then you have Scott Miller, who's likely going to be taking over for Antonio Brown, who was the leading receiver in the last game last season against the Rams. Tyler Johnson, you can expect to see him as well, since Antonio Brown is likely not going to play due to being on the COVID IR. We will see, but right now it's not looking good for him to play. Rob Gronkowski is next. He's caught 4 of Tom Brady's 9 touchdowns. Tom Brady is on an absolute tear to start the season through 2 games. Then the Cameron Braid, of course, the other tight end, who is a pretty interesting target. Tom Brady does try to connect with him. They don't really use O.J. Howard as much. Cameron Braid is another guy, of course, on this offense. From left to right, you have Donovan Smith. You have Ali Marpet. Then, of course, you do have the big bad Ryan Jensen in the middle. Next to him, Alex Kappa. And next to him, the phenomenal second-year right tackle, Tristan Wirfs. Moving on to the defense, Ndamukong Suh. You guys know him very well. He is, of course, a defensive end. Followed by Vita Vea, somebody that I think everybody's been talking about. Really can't wait to see him against Brian Allen. We'll get into that more later. On top of that, you have William Golston. You have Raheem Nunez Roches, who's more of a rotational interior defensive lineman. We'll likely see him at times, as well as Steve McClendon. And then kind of interesting here, and we'll talk about it, coming up with the injuries, but Jason Pierre-Paul is likely not going to play, and so that leaves the rookie out of Washington, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, to take over at that spot, outside linebacker with Shaq Barrett. In addition, you have the inside backers, Devin White, and, of course, the longtime veteran linebacker, Levante David. In addition to that, you have cornerbacks Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and nickel corner, who will get some action in this one, who has struggled a little bit, Ross Cockrell. Followed by 3 safeties you're going to want to keep an eye on. Antoine Winfield Jr., the talented second-year player, not to mention Jordan Whitehead, who is back from injury, and Mike Edwards, who had not 1 but 2 pick sixes last week against the Atlanta Falcons. So that is the lineup for the Bucs. Of course, you're going to start 11 guys. I do mention more than 11, but I'm going to mention guys that I think will have an impact or key guys to watch. So there you go. Injury report. So really interesting here, Jason Pierre-Paul is nursing a hand and shoulder injury, and he is not practicing and unlikely to play. So it does look like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka will get an opportunity as a rookie to start. On top of that, Antonio Brown, like I mentioned earlier, with the COVID IR, it's going to be really telling. He either has the vaccine or he doesn't. If he doesn't have the vaccine, he probably can't even get, he can't get ready for Sunday. If he already took the vaccine and everything, then he needs 2 negative COVID tests 48 hours before the game, and then he's good to go. So keep that in mind. On the Rams side of things, we have Leonard Floyd dealing with an ankle. Sean McVay basically described this as something that has been lingering, and they're trying to get ahead of it now and limit it and just, make sure they have him under wraps. He still could potentially play. There's no word yet on that, as well as Darrell Henderson, somebody that Sean McVay came out early in the week and said, he really wants him to play. He thinks it's possible that he could play, but there's just not enough information out there. He was a DNP, did not practice with, of course, that rib injury he suffered against the Colts. Hate to see that, but those are the injuries there. Jacob Harris had a hip injury, but he is limited, so he will likely be ready to go, but we'll have to see on that. And he's an interesting one that I'll touch on in a little bit. So let's dive right into it. Look, the Buccaneers are the reigning Super Bowl champions, and I think this game is huge. But I do want to have a quick caveat here that going through with the Buccaneers, I did notice something. And I don't think it's something, I know we get caught up in these, I guess, these huge moments where a team just takes the league by storm. Like the way the Buccaneers, after following back-to-back losses in the same fashion, 27-24 to the Rams and 27-24 to the Chiefs, they have not lost since. However, I went back and I looked at those games, 2 of those of which were against the 4-12 Falcons, one of which was against the 5-11 Lions, and then the 7-9 Vikings to finish out the season. On top of that, they went up against the 7-9 Washington football team, in which they almost lost. They went up against the, of course, a very good 12-4 Saints team, but albeit it's the Saints team with Drew Brees in his last ever football game. On top of that, you go up against the Packers, who again were 13-3, but we're missing their left tackle, David Bakhtiari, and that game came down to the wire. And then the Chiefs, who they played, they were without 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen starting in that game, where Patrick Mahomes really had to make just everything himself. So it's not to take anything away from the defending Super Bowl champions, but it's to add some context here. Now, I've been hearing a lot of, if the Rams can't beat this team, is this team even beatable? I guess it depends. But can we really call them unbeatable right now? I don't really think so. When you look at the combined record for teams that they've beat in that stretch, not considering this season, that stretch, guys, that combined record is 66-62. Above 500, yes, but it's not an amazing bunch of teams that they beat, and they didn't beat them by a ton. And when I went back and I looked at the Rams game, I was surprised to know that the Rams actually outgained Tampa 413 yards to 251 in their last meeting. That was with Jared Goff turning the ball over twice. That was with a few huge and crucial pass interference calls that were called on the Rams that were very, again, controversial, ticky-tack, what have you, that kept Tampa in the game. So again, not trying to throw Tampa under the bus, not trying to say they're not the big deal. I had them winning the Super Bowl. I do think they are number 2 in the league right now, but this is why I'm just also saying this is not the most generational team ever. I've been seeing, this is an unbeatable team. Let's pump the brakes there a little bit. So I wanted to just throw that out there with my research, going back and watching the original game. Those are my thoughts on that. So let's get into it, right? Let's just get right into it. The key matchups here, Aaron Donald versus Ali Marpet. And let's be honest here. Aaron Donald was moving all over the offensive line, lining up all over the defensive line, lining up against different guys. So you had Quentin Nelson last week, and then Quentin Nelson, he moves over and he goes up against Ryan Kelly, and then he moves over and he goes up against, they isolated him one-on-one with Glowinski, and then he goes up against Julian Davenport. So this is somebody that will be mobile. He'll be all over the defensive line, but for the most part, I think he's going to be going up against Ali Marpet. It's a great matchup. Marpet's a very good offensive lineman. Obviously, Aaron Donald can change the game. He was held without a sack in the last game, although he put a lot of pressure on Tom Brady on that sack. The only sack the Rams generated the last time they faced him. Now, moving on to other key matchups here, we have Justin Hollins / Jordan Fuller versus Rob Gronkowski. Hear me out when I say this. Okay, John Johnson has never been needed more than this game. Until I've seen otherwise, John Johnson is needed in this game, and they will not have him. He did an incredible job going back and watching the tape, watching the game all over again. He did an incredible job against Rob Gronkowski, really took him completely out of the game. He was non-factor for the most part. Jordan Fuller's 2 interceptions are misleading. He didn't have a bad game, but Jordan Fuller had 2 interceptions that basically just went right into his breadbasket. Tom Brady underthrew both of them. So let's call it like it is. He had 2 interceptions. That's great. But like Mike Edwards last week with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, having it just fall right in his hands and going in the end zone for 2 pick sixes that were just bizarre, it's kind of that deal. So we'll see Jordan Fuller. He needs to take on a bigger role here. He needs to be that John Johnson. I haven't been truly impressed the last 2 weeks, but I do love this guy. I think he has a lot of talent, a lot of potential. We'll see in this one. Hopefully he can make a big-time impact, but if not, then Justin Hollins is an interesting one, because at times Justin Hollins had the pleasure of going up against Rob Gronkowski, and watching 58 chase 87 reminded me of the Super Bowl all over again, in which Corey Littleton, of course, who was great all season long, gave up that pretty much the end of the game on that big pass in the Super Bowl. So Rob Gronkowski against Justin Hollins and Jordan Fuller, I don't know how they'll do it. I don't think they're going to isolate Ramsey on him, because Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, there's just so many weapons in this offense. But the key here is to make sure Gronkowski is taken out of the game, because he can destroy you. I think this is Gronk. He's back. I really do. He's in football shape. He's familiar, everything. I really do think he's back. So the Rams are going to have to be prepared and shut him down the way they did last year. So that is a key matchup. And then the last one here that I'll highlight is Brian Allen versus Vita Vea. And of course, why would it not be? We've been talking about this for weeks. We've been talking about this since preseason. Brian Allen is going to be tested early on. He goes up against Akeem Hicks, he goes up against DeForest Buckner, and he goes up against Vita Vea. Welcome to the NFL, my friend. He's already started in this league, but now he's starting on a team that really has a chance to win a Super Bowl, and he needs to be able to pick up the pace. And really what he's been able to do in the last 2 weeks has been truly impressive. If you guys haven't seen my film breakdown, you can check up below. But let's just call it like it is. Brian Allen has played very well, and even better than Austin Blythe, last year's starter, did. And so we'll see if this carries on. But Vita Vea is a monster. He's a huge mismatch, because he's just so physically imposing, and he dominates people at the point of attack. We will see he is healthy now. He did not play in that game against the Rams. He is healthy in this one. We will see how much of an impact he makes. But that's a big, big matchup, and that could decide this game. If Brian Allen stifles Vita Vea, they might be able to even run the football. We will see. No team has really been able to run the football on the Buccaneers, and that goes back to last season. Rams tried. They got some luck out of Akers. They didn't really get anything out of Henderson, and they didn't really get much out of Malcolm. So, they didn't really run the ball much either. Tampa Bay actually outran them, and they were in the 40s. So they both did a nice job stopping the run. Those are my key matchups. Now we move on. We're going to go through the 5 on the Tampa Bay side, 5 on the Rams side, players to watch. Number 1 for Tampa Bay, Vita Vea. I'm just going to say this right now. I can't stress it enough. This guy can absolutely dominate the game. He can take it over. He's not Donald, okay? But he's different than Donald. He's a gap eater. Because he's so big and he moves so well, he can really clog the gaps and make sure that you can't even run. So if you can't establish the run and they shut down the pass, then Tampa Bay is going to win this football game. And a lot of that is going to come down to Vita Vea making plays. Of course, this team did not play him last year. Keep that in mind. Number 2, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who is taking over for Jason Pierre-Paul in all likelihood. Now, Shoyinka actually just played his first few snaps, actually a bunch of snaps. I think he played about 18 of the last game against the Falcons. He showed up in preseason. This is a guy they like a lot. And so I think, he's somebody that you have to be aware of. Whether he's coming off the edge, against Andrew Whitworth, or they have him deployed on the outside of Rob Havenstein, he can make an impact. Quick, he's got great bend. He's powerful. So this is a kid that could definitely, make an impact in this game and is someone to watch moving forward. Now, the next guy is Scott Miller. And the reason is, Scotty Miller was a starter last year. And then, the Buccaneers come in and they're able to sign Antonio Brown. And then Scotty Miller took a lesser role. Well, if Antonio Brown isn't ready to go, Scotty Miller's going to take over that role again. And he's somebody that Tom Brady has no issue throwing to. He's reliable over the middle, great slot receiver, very underrated, can get open, can find the soft spot in the zone. That's somebody to watch. He comes in at 3. Number 4 is Jordan Whitehead, the safety. He actually generated a huge turnover last season. Jared Goff was throwing into triple coverage, but did not see Jordan Whitehead flying down the field. He picked off the pass and kind of changed the momentum of the game. The Rams had multiple opportunities last season to absolutely take that game to another level and potentially even blow out Tampa, and they really kept them in it. As great as Goff played, he made some mistakes, 2 interceptions. including that one to Jordan Whitehead, which is why I think Whitehead being back from injury now, and this is his second game since the injury, he's got to be feeling fresh, and he's got to be feeling he's ready to go. And he knows he picked off the Rams last year. We'll see if he'll do that again against Stafford. He's a damn good player, doesn't get enough respect. He comes in at 4. And then number 5 here is Rob Gronkowski. I mean, why would it not be? Rob Gronkowski, number 87. You have to know where he is on the field. We know Godwin. We know Mike Evans, all of that. But Gronkowski has revitalized his career in Tampa. He is a threat. And right now, he is the number 2 fantasy tight end, only behind Travis Kelce in the league. He has been dominant to this point. He has been a red zone force. He gets open. And of course, that rapport that goes back years with Tom Brady is not going to just die overnight. So the Rams have to have a plan of attack, and they have to be aware that maybe Tampa knows the Rams, knows what they want to do, understands they see a lot of film on Gronkowski and the way he's been used, and you have to realize Tom Brady will go to another guy and make plays. I mean, this is a great thing with him. He can spread the ball around. So if Gronkowski magically you want to take him out of the game, they could use that to their advantage and force feed Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. So this is a player to watch because he could dictate the whole offense and the way Tampa wants to move throughout the game. Moving on to the Rams, number 1 guy I'm going to highlight is Deshaun Jackson. I've been asked this repeatedly. Deshaun Jackson, why hasn't he been used? Is it because games like this, you don't want to show your hand, you don't want to show how much you're going to use him? What is the deal? And I think it's a combination of, things are going well the way they are, but I do think there is some truth to that. And so for that reason, I highlight Deshaun Jackson here. I could see him taking the top off the defense. Keep in mind, he's a former Buck. We love those revenge games, don't we? Well, we'll see what he does, but he's definitely an interesting one here. Barely playing any snaps against the Colts. He comes in at 1. Number 2, Brian Allen. I hate to repeat these guys, but Brian Allen just makes way too much sense. If you're not watching 55, I don't know what you're doing. He's putting together some great tape, and on top of that, I feel like he's getting better each week. Now, he's only played 2 games, but the game against the Colts, he was one of the best centers all week. And on top of that, furthermore, didn't allow a sack. I think at worst he allowed 2 pressures, and that might be being hard on him. Probably only allowed 1. So to be real with you, Brian Allen, number 55, you should be watching. He comes in at 2. Number 3 is Jacob Harris. Yeah, that's right. I know I probably shocked you. Jacob Harris. Why Jacob Harris? He hasn't taken 1 offensive snap. This is what this game was made for, right? This is why they got Jacob Harris. They got him for the long term, yes. But they didn't really use him in preseason the way they want to. I said they kept towing the line. This is the type of game where you just take out Jacob Harris and, you have a trick under your sleeve, and that's Jacob Harris in the red zone. Don't be surprised if Gronkowski scores a touchdown. The Rams match that with Harris on the other end. I have him in at 3, another number 87 you want to watch. And then coming in at 4 is Sony Michel, the running back that's likely going to start. I really am not feeling great about Henderson not practicing on Thursday. We'll see on Friday. This will be coming out on Friday, but I don't feel great about it. And so as much as I love Henderson, I feel like Sony Michel could get the load here. And I do feel like the Rams might try to run the football. I know they kind of gave up on it last year, but here's the thing. It's a different year, and keep this in mind. Jared Goff was not scaring guys the way Matthew Stafford scares guys over the top. So that's a big thing for me. And so that's why I have, in that regard anyway, I have Sony Michel as a guy to look out for. Number 5, Darius Williams. Darius Williams shut down Antonio Brown. But it's a tale of 2 halves. When you go back and you watch the game last year, Antonio Brown had his way with Darius Williams in the first half. However, in the second half, you could tell Darius Williams was tired of hearing it, and he absolutely stifled Antonio Brown, who actually led the team in receiving. Brown's likely not going to play, but Darius Williams is still a player that needs to be looked out for. I think people are sleeping on him right now because he hasn't been doing much, and Jalen Ramsey has. That's not always a bad thing. When you're not hearing much about what your corner's doing, that's normally a good sign. I have him coming in at 5. Those are your players to watch. Now, as far as this goes, this preview, the Rams, I think they're going to win by just, playing their style of football. Whether they want to control the clock, whether they want to throw deep down the field, test this defense. I think that's the best way to go. Dak Prescott did it coming right off an ankle injury. His first game back from last year, breaking his ankle. He threw for however many yards, over 400, I believe. I think that's the way to do it. I think you can test this secondary. I think it's going to be not hard to do it. And on top of that, I do think this defense is going to be able to get to Tom Brady, which is how you need to win. Because once you can start pushing Tom Brady on his back, making him uncomfortable, you can win any game against Tom Brady in whatever team he's playing. But when Tom Brady has all day to throw, he's going to pick you apart. I don't think the Rams are that defense that can't get through, and so I do expect them to get some pressure on him. Another guy, kind of a bonus guy to watch out for, is Chris Garrett, because Chris Garrett is coming off the COVID IR. We don't know how big of a role he would play. Leonard Floyd is hurt, so we don't know if he's going to go. I think he does, but he might be a little limited, so we might see some Terrell Lewis. Justin Hollins, of course, is going to start, but don't be surprised if you see Chris Garrett come in, make a sack or something like that, get his confidence boost. I mean, here's the thing. This is a guy that I think is going to be a situational pass rusher until he gets comfortable, and then potentially down the road, you're looking at him as a starter. But right now, I see him as a situational pass rusher, and that's a player to watch as well. So all in all, here are my predictions for the game. I have Matthew Stafford throwing over 350 yards. I'm not going to do touchdowns this week. It's really hard to predict with the Rams, but I have 350 yards. I think he's going to have command of this offense. I think this is going to be one of his best games of his career, and it's going to need to be because this is, again, the reigning and defending Super Bowl champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The second prediction here, Cooper Kupp goes over 150 yards. Look, the way he's playing right now, Peter Schrager came out and said he thinks he might actually be the best receiver in all of football. He was serious about that. I don't think he's insane either. Cooper Kupp is not the fastest. He's not the tallest. He's not the quickest. Just he does everything super well. He's solid all around. And by not having any sort of weakness to his game, it allows him to do what he does. And by the way, he was doing what he was doing last year. He had over 100 yards against Tampa, just like Robert Woods did. It was a great game for him. He had, I believe, 11 catches in that game. This was his big game last year with Jared Goff. Goff actually wanted to throw down the field a little bit in this one. Matthew Stafford, we already know, isn't afraid to throw down the field. So Cooper Kupp goes over 150. The next thing here, okay, Rams are going to sack Brady 3 times. They did it once last year, and keep in mind, they don't get credit for a sack on the incomplete pass that probably should have been a fumble. You guys know. You know the one I'm talking about. Morgan Fox hit his hand. The ball came out, but they said he was going forward. Whatever. Tuck Rule 2.0, right? I'm just kidding. But it didn't matter anyway because they won. However, I do expect this time the Rams will get 3 sacks. They should have had about 8 against Carson Wentz. The thing about Wentz is that last week he was able to get going. He was able to make magic. He was able to escape. Tom Brady's a statue in the pocket. He can't escape. He can't move. If you get to him, you're going to hit him. The ball has to be released or he's in trouble. So I do expect the Rams to be able to collect 3 sacks in this one. Not give him too much of a fit, but get to him enough where you're like, okay, they did a nice job. 3 sacks for the Rams. The Rams are going to generate at least 1 turnover, whether it be a forced fumble, an interception, what have you. I do expect the Rams defense to continue their streak of forcing turnovers, and I think they do it in this one. And then lastly here, to wrap this thing up, the Rams win 38-34. I understand, there's many people thinking that the Bucs are going to win this game, and that's fine, but I will say this right now, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. This is the most talented team the Buccaneers have played since they got Tom Brady. I understand how that sounds, but when you look at the Chiefs team that they played in the Super Bowl, that was not the best Chiefs team. That was not the most talented Chiefs team. That team had 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen starting. They were replaced due to injury. This is a somewhat healthy Rams team. Doesn't have Cam Akers, who did have a touchdown last year and made an impact. Of course, that is a big blow. But when you look at this team, though, you have to like what you see. And I think Matthew Stafford is the equalizer here. I think he changes the game. And this is why I think it's the most talented team that the Bucs have played since Tom Brady has joined. I don't think that's crazy to say. So with that being said, Rams win 38-34. Now let's get on to the fun facts, and we'll get out of here. Real quick, Kevin O'Connell was once a teammate of Tom Brady going back to 2008. Kind of cool there. Raheem Morris was once the head coach of the Buccaneers. As you guys know, that's not anything too shocking. Sean McVay also did get his NFL start with Tampa as a quality control coach. On top of that, Ndamukong Suh was not only a Ram during the Super Bowl against the Patriots and Tom Brady, but of course he played with Matthew Stafford, the Rams quarterback right now, for 4 years. So that's always cool, and you probably knew that with the Detroit Lions. Rams are the only team in the NFL, which you might not know this, who have scored on the first 2 possessions of those 2 games. And on those 2 possessions, guess what? Matthew Stafford had 0 incomplete passes. We'll see if they continue that moving forward. Cooper Kupp is 3rd in the league in receiving yards. He is absolutely killing it. On top of that, you have Rams' Jordan Fuller. He picked off Tom Brady last year twice in the 27-24 win on the road in Tampa. Aaron Donald is still 1.5 sacks away from becoming the Rams' all-time sack leader in franchise history, as we've always said. Yes, we do know that Deacon Jones and Jack Youngblood had more sacks, but for whatever reason, the NFL doesn't want to count those or go back in time and count them. It is what it is. Rams are 17-9 versus the Buccaneers in the all-time franchise series, and going back to 2012, the Rams are actually 6-1, with their only loss coming at the Coliseum in 2019 to Jameis Winston in a bizarre game in which the Rams got down early on. They came all the way back, and they still lost 55-40. That was just an absolutely bizarre game. And then pretty much wrapped up the 2019 season in a bow. Early on, that was how the 2019 season was going to go for the Rams. And then the Rams in last year's meeting had only sacked Brady once, like I mentioned, had 3 more penalties called on them, won the time of possession battle by almost 7 minutes. And, when I look at that, they tied with 2 interceptions apiece. They averaged 5.8 yards to Tampa Bay's 3.7, and they outgained Tampa, once again, 413-251. The Rams really outplayed Tampa Bay last year. So I guess my hope here is that that's not the case this year, because if they're outplaying Tampa Bay that much and they still, they win, but it's close, that's telling me that Sean McVay is kind of doing the same thing. Going back and watching the film, I can't stress enough, Sean McVay, his first drive, Jared Goff's first drive, that was surgical. That was amazing. You know why? Because it was scripted. The script worked. They had a great chemistry. Everything was going. But as the game went on, Jared Goff had to make a couple huge throws down the stretch. He also made a couple bad throws. But Sean McVay's play calling got questionable late in the game. They went away from the run game. I don't hate it, because Jared Goff showed you that he could still make plays and throw deep down the field and do everything he could to win that football game. However, when you're up 413 to 251 and you only win by 3, that's because of miscues. The play calling, running end arounds on 3rd and 5 is just not conducive to winning football. So I hope Sean McVay doesn't do what he did against the Colts, like I broke down in my Brian Allen film, because guys can see that coming from a mile away. So again, not to knock Sean McVay, I think he's done a stellar job with the Rams, but the hope is that Sean McVay's play calling is a little bit better than it was last year against Tampa. Of course, we'll just take a win however we can get it, right? I mean, that's really what fans want. They just want to win. But I do think it would be telling if the Rams came out, had that same approach, and just didn't make those miscues. We would actually see a high-scoring game and potentially an easy win for the Rams against the Bucs. Hopefully it's not more of the same like last week where you have to sweat it out. But even if it is, this is going to be a fun one. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you keep it here, of course, for all your Rams content, opinion, etc. We do film breakdowns as well. Check out the Downtown Rams podcast for additional content with me and Alexis Kraft. That's my podcast. And furthermore, be sure to check out our pregame and our postgame live streams. You have questions, we have answers. So thank you guys so much. You guys take care, and I will talk to you guys soon.